Malinda, you see me? I see you, Malinda. Hold on. Okay. I'm gonna tap you in a couple of minutes, Malinda. Just give me like 5 minutes. It's not 7 o'clock yet. 6:58. I'm just gonna put you in. Who's this?
Listen, you said 5 minutes.
No, I know. Sorry, but I said
Shut up.
because I went to like tap it to like I don't know to do something, and then I think it messed up.
That's okay. I had a thing that I could rest my phone on, but I can't. I just broke it.
You did what?
I just broke it. The thing that I was gonna rest my phone on.
Oh, you broke it? I'm just gonna like at 7 o'clock I'll introduce the live. So I can do it with integrity.
Okay. So I'm gonna I don't know if I'm gonna turn my thingy up. What's this?
What does it say?
No, the thing broke, so it's
It broke?
yeah, I have to hold it now because I had a thing that I was gonna rest it on.
Ave Maria.
Hi, Bev.
Bev's there. Hey, Bev.
Hi, Damone.
So you know these people.
Well, I know Nova Man Dark. I know Queen. I know my Bev. Use a book. No, but I don't understand. My thing is charging. I have to listen. Everything that I have to go through, Beverly, you don't. It's too much. That's my preparation.
Okay. So let me just get right into it so that we can start this because we have 1 hour. Right? Okay. So welcome everyone. This is our first live series, right, that we're doing on unpacking white supremacy and the mental health field. My name is Antonio Morales. I am the founder of the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, and that's a private practice. And the intention of that private practice is basically to address and challenge white supremacy in our mental health. And I work primarily with Black and brown folks because we tend to deal with the impact of white supremacy. And so if you want to know anything else about the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services, just go to www.theliberatedself.org and you'll find out the information there. I will read you the mission statement, however, because I think it's a good mission statement. To disrupt and dismantle the psychological chaos and confusion of white supremacy, facilitating a transformative process that will allow Black and brown folks to heal from and transcend the adverse impact of white supremacy in all areas of their lives. So that's the mission statement of the Liberated Self Therapeutic Services. Now, this is a series, like I said, it's unpacking white supremacy in the mental health field. And this is an offshoot of Freedom Fighters of the Mind. What is Freedom Fighters of the Mind? Freedom Fighters of the Mind is an initiative where we're creating a community for Black and brown therapists who actually are actively engaged in challenging white supremacy, challenging and addressing and challenging white supremacy in the mental health field. That means through the work with their clients or in the agencies or organizations that they work for. And so this community is designed to provide us with some support to affirm us as Black and brown therapists and mental health professionals who are not therapists, so that we can not feel alienated or isolated in the spaces that we're in, because a lot of times we're in mostly white dominant spaces, and so we can't sort of speak up about our experiences around white supremacy. So the intention of Freedom Fighters of the Minds is to allow us a space to speak up about that without getting or dealing with the backlash, which I don't know if some of you have dealt with, but I know I have. So I thought this conversation is super important, because white supremacy, as you know, is everywhere, right? And when we talk about white supremacy, this is an umbrella term, right? So under the white supremacy umbrella term, we can talk about systemic racism, we could talk about racial microaggressions, we can talk about differential treatment, we can talk about, and so on and so forth. We could talk about police brutality, we could talk about the mass incarceration of Black and brown folks. We could talk about so many things under white supremacy, but it's white supremacy. When we're thinking about a Karen or a Ken, that's white supremacy in action. And so when you think about white supremacy, think about all of those sort of transgressions against Black and brown folk in particular. Did I leave anything out, Malinda?
No, you're on a roll.
Okay, so Malinda is our first guest, and let me just tell you something about Malinda. Malinda was in my graduate program while we was at Lehman College in the Bronx. And I remember that in that graduate program, one of the things that I used to do was challenge, the professors around what they was teaching. I used to have a lot of questions because I felt like a lot of what we were learning in our curriculum was sort of whitewashed. And so I always had questions because I felt like when we're examining or we're learning stuff about social work, right, I feel like there was not enough of our experiences sort of expressed. And so I always had questions around that. And Malinda, I guess Malinda got me. And so she decided one day to say, I'm going to sit next to you. Remember that, Malinda? You don't remember? So Malinda sat next to me. And ever since then, she's been mad cool. So I appreciated that sort of the joining of me in that space, because I know that what I was talking about, people were like, we don't really know too much about that, especially the professors, since we have mostly white professors. And so that is why Malinda's here, because she's super dope. She's an LMSW as well as a SIFI. And Malinda, I'm not going to say any more about you. You're going to introduce yourself after we do our icebreaker. But before we do our icebreaker, how's it going, Malinda?
I can't complain. I have good news that I'll share with you off the air afterwards. So it's been a good day. It's been a good day. It's been a really good day.
It's been a really good day. Okay.
Really good day, yeah.
Okay, great. So, anything else you want to share about your day?
No.
Okay. Okay. So, Malinda, before you introduce yourself, right, I want to do something like an icebreaker. And the intention of this icebreaker is sort of to celebrate us and celebrate you and where you come from. Because a lot of times we kind of forget, where we come from. Like, who are the shoulders? What shoulders are we standing on? And so this particular icebreaker is designed to have us get present to what it is that, who it is that the shoulders that we're standing on. And so with that being said, Malinda, I want you to see if you can tell me, tell me, who are your people, right? Like, where do you come from? Where your people come from? And tell me one attribute or characteristic that you sort of inherited from them that you see or deem as positive.
So I guess I would say two things, right? So my family emigrated from Jamaica coming to England, right? So I came from England and came here. But I think that what I learned from them was manners are free. Hard work it's a non-negotiable, right? You can come with nothing, but it doesn't mean that you'll remain with nothing, right? So just because you came with nothing, it doesn't mean that that has to be your be-all, end-all. That's just your starting point. But it's not an excuse not to continue to strive and continue to push. So I have no excuse.
So you have no excuse. So when you say I have no excuse, how does that show up in your life?
I have no excuse. Neither one of my grandparents went to school, right? Smartest people I know, best cooks on the planet, could plant any vegetable, could cook any dish, but weren't formally educated, right? So for me to come and stem from them and further my education on paper, right?
Yeah.
Because the education that we require now is very different from the skill set that they required to live and survive. We have to have this spoon-fed education just in order to say, listen, here's this degree. Now, can I apply for this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had to walk that path and navigate that land, that minefield. Yeah.
Got it. So in some ways, when you're thinking about like how we sort of have to maneuver through the current times, it's a different sort of process.
Right.
And I think what
Right.
I'm hearing is that it's like sort of more challenging.
Right.
There's
No,
like
no, no, no. I wouldn't even say it's more challenging, Antonio, because the minefield is the compromise, right? So as immigrants, the compromise maybe you take the lesser skilled job in order to support your family, right? That
mm,
you knew you had a trade, you knew you had a skill set, but depending on where you went, that skill set either wasn't valued because what you looked like or how you spoke. So you had to do something that you knew was leaps and bounds, you know, you could do more, right?
yeah.
So then when you fast forward now and you look at us and we go through this education system and you sit in a classroom with an Antonio who questions every theory and every theorist and every perspective because that's one aspect of the truth. That's the compromise that we had to do in order to get that degree to say that we are masters of this thing called social work, right? That's the compromise.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, and when I hear compromise, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the compromise is having to challenge? Or
Or
am I missing you?
yeah, or not challenge,
The,
right?
the,
Or not challenge, like to accept to a certain extent so that you could navigate the minefield. If you said no to everything at Lehman, would you have a degree?
no.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's the compromise.
yeah. In some ways we have to assimilate.
Right.
Even if it doesn't sort of it's not necessarily grounded in truth.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, got it. So that was the icebreaker. Thanks for like participating in that. And again, that was meant to celebrate, you know, where you come from, your people, and the shoulders that you stand on. Because I'm very clear that we're not here because we're here by ourselves, right? There's a whole community, a whole bunch of people, ancestors, and elders who had to sacrifice in order so that we can have the next opportunity. And I know every generation is sort of more advanced than the last generation. And if it wasn't for our people, right, who struggled and busted their asses to sort of get us to this point, where would we be, right? What would be our opportunities? I don't think we'll have the same kind of opportunities. And so that's the intention of that, the icebreaker. Now, without further ado, please introduce yourself and let us know, you know, what it is that you do with your current position and what is it that you do. And just give us a sense of what's happening with you currently.
Like I said, today was a big day. So right now I run a supported housing program. The clients all come from the shelter. They're required to have co-occurring disorders, right? So you must have a mental health diagnosis and a substance use disorder. That's for the family set. For the young, they're all coming from foster care. They also have to have a mental health illness and a substance. And there's definitely, you know, we don't have enough room for that. We don't. There's always going to be people that are waiting, always. But we'll never have to look for that population.
Yeah.
There. And for the most part, they look like us.
I just feel like when I think about like even, you know, in our internships or, you know, in our spaces that we've been working at, like I feel like a lot of times they do look like us, right?
Right.
I rarely see sort of it's not that there's not other people sort of occupying those spaces, but I feel like we're the ones that access the services the most, it seems. And maybe that's because of our location, right? Because you're in the Bronx, right?
I'm in the South Bronx.
You're in the South Bronx, the South Bronx.
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
and so I've been mostly in the inner cities of New York, whether it's Manhattan, Brooklyn, or the Bronx. And so I've mainly interacted with our people as well. So that's interesting though, because I think this is why this conversation is so important, is because it's us. And it's not that other folks don't access mental health treatment or services, right? Or social services. It's just that when I think about how many of us depend on the system of mental health or social services, that could be sort of dangerous when we're thinking about like the conversation we're about to, delve into, because it could actually do a lot more harm to us. And I think one of the things I want to sort of stress before we begin the questions is that when we're dealing with the sort of historical context that we're dealing with, right, and living inside of today, and we go seek services from people who mostly don't get us, or systems that necessarily don't get us, it could do a lot more harm than good. And I think the reason why I'm having this conversation is because I want to sort of bring to light, or sort of normalize, right, the challenges that people of color, as well as the workers, right, the therapists and so on and so forth, that we face because of white supremacy, right? And it's not often encouraged. We can't talk about that. We're not encouraged to talk about that. It's like, shh, don't say anything, because somebody's going to get offended, right? So we can't really talk about that in the way that can allow us to acknowledge it for what it is. So then we can look at our services and sort of transform our services, like almost like shift our services, right, to sort of meet the unique mental health needs of our clients. And so, okay, so how long you been in the mental health field and social services?
Social services, I would say, wow, hold on, that can't be right. Yeah, almost 20 years. I'm trying to add up. I'm saying it can't be almost 20 years because I'm only years old. But I'm thinking, yeah, it's been almost 20 years. Wow. Yeah, it's been almost 20 years.
And so what?
And the common thread, right? That,
Yeah.
so I would say my first 12 years was child welfare, right? So it's more children that look like me and you, right?
Yeah.
And dealing with trauma on any level. And then fast forward on the back end now, coming to supportive housing and seeing older versions of those little people. Most 9 times out of 10, they have a history of foster care, a history of trauma, right? So, and what I told you the other day when I said, I was going to expand on, the presumption and the assumption and the privilege of the P, right?
Yeah, the P, I don't know what that is yet.
The P that you don't know what that is, right? So I'm going to tell you now that the P is the post, right? So we throw around this term PTSD. It's all of our kids have it, all of our adults have it. PTSD, secondary to whatever, rape, trauma, assault, prison, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of our people, we don't have the privilege of that P, right? So post the assumption that the trauma has ended and you're now healing from said trauma.
Oh, that's such a good point.
But just walking in our skin and walking in our truth and walking with that stigma and walking with all of those other wounds that we've got from being brown, from being women, from not speaking the language, from being raped, from being on drugs, from losing your kids to getting your kids back, to being in active addiction and relapsing and all of those things, depending on who decides what, right? So in child welfare, there's no such thing as harm reduction, right? If you relapse, you lose your kids. You come over to harm reduction. Oh, relapse is part of recovery. Okay, tell that to family court. It's two very different belief systems for the same disease, which is addiction, right?
Yeah.
In court, you relapse, you lose your kids. The harm reduction understands that relapse is part of addiction. Relapse is part of recovery. But the two don't connect when you have family court and when you have the harm reduction model. So
right.
Then idea of that post, right? That post-traumatic stress, the post that has to go because it's current and it's ongoing.
It should be like instead of the P, it should be the C. Current.
Or ongoing or
ongoing.
ongoing or recovering or anything. But the post is just something that we haven't had the privilege of have the luxury of having, because it's ongoing.
You know, that's such a beautiful point, because I feel like a lot of times it is like something that happened already versus something that's ongoing, right? And that's such a goodness. I never saw it that way before until you just sort of mentioned it, right? Like even to say post is a privilege, right?
And
But
it minimizes,
we
right?
don't
And
have
it
that.
minimizes the experience, because
Yes,
you're saying this experience has happened and now you are triggered by it, or, you know, affected by it, but it never
yes,
stopped. You're assuming that the trauma was a one-time thing and now I'm moving on through it, but I'm living through it and I'm moving through it and adjusting to it and having to live with it. So
damn
yeah,
it.
that's
Woo.
the P I was
You
about.
know, when like sort of getting present to that reality sort of made me feel a certain way just now. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
It got me real present to what it is that we're currently ongoingly dealing with, and how that makes it even more challenging for what we do, right?
right,
Because the people that come to us because they look just like us, right? Including ourselves, right? We're
right,
sort of still dealing with that now.
right,
In every way you can think of, right? Like you can just turn on the media news and you can see what's happening,
right.
right? It's like a constant sort of attack of black and brown folks, especially like black men. And so that's pretty interesting. Thanks for sharing that. I think that was a great
And
point you just
what
made.
Beverly said, she said, and most people don't have the ability to work through the trauma,
Right.
so they have to cope, right? So again, it's the idea of the P. We don't have that P. We don't have the luxury of that post. You just have to learn to work live with it.
And coping is not always healthy, right? Because there's some coping strategies that we take on that can be actually destructive, that can
Right,
further destroy us or degrade us or dehumanize us, right? Because we think of coping like, oh, coping is like, oh, it's always, a lot of times it's actually, it further destroys us, right? It's more destructive than helpful, or it harms us more. Um, it's an interesting point. Thanks for sharing that. I think, you know, something we can further think about. Now, when you think about like, so when you're thinking about, you know, you said you've been around for like 20 years in the social services field. What
20, wow.
inspired you to step into this, to this work?
I knew that me naturally, I was always somebody that cared for other people in a way that, you know, I was that person. Like if I was watching Montel Williams, and that's going to age me as well, but I don't care. You know, when Montel would tell the people, you know, if you could talk into the camera and your sister's here, you know, and your sister can hear you, what would you say? And
Yeah,
next thing you know, the sister's coming from the back. I'm on the floor. I'm in tears. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
oh, the sister. I feel, you know, and just kids. The idea that, you know, when I worked in child welfare, there was just this notion that, you know, these kids could go to school and no one cared if they went to school. No one cared about their report cards. There was no parent teacher. There was no, you know, after school activities. There was none of that. And it was the idea that I just wanted, it started off with me, just, I wanted the kids on my caseload to know that someone gave a shit if they
Mm,
failed, if they made an A, or they were failing and they made a D, you know? That if they didn't go to school, someone would wonder where they were.
mm-hmm,
You know, if they were in a play, someone would be in the audience and they could see someone who was there to see them.
mm.
That sort of thing.
Like just to
Yeah.
affirm.
And that, for me, that was easy. It wasn't like coming to work. It was like I was almost paid just to just do what I love to do. And it just continued to evolve. Like most people, when they come into child welfare, they're not like, yay, I found something I love. I did. I loved it,
Yeah, I got it.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So that sort of brings us into the conversation now, right? And I think some of the things you mentioned, some of the examples you mentioned around, you know, what we sort of look at in the social services field or mental health, um, it feels like a conversation that sort of speaks to already white supremacy, even though we're not using that term white supremacy, right? So let's get into white supremacy. In your own words, and there's no correct answer, right? Like, how do you sort of define or describe white supremacy?
How do I define it? I don't know. Coming from, you know, coming from a country that colonized other countries, um, we had a king and a queen, right? So, and that king and queen colonized my grandparents' country and probably Beverly's grandparents' country and Naomi's grandparents' country and Anna Banana's, like that's the epitome of it, right? I'm the product of it, right? So, I guess people could say that, we speak the language of our colonizers, right? I speak the language of my colonizer, this brown
Mm-hmm.
person. I speak the language of my colonizer. So
Mm-hmm.
white supremacy is just the idea that it's just it's someone's idea to me. This is what I consider it to be. Someone's idea of what should and shouldn't be and isn't allowed, regardless of the ideas of the others. Definitely. Even when it comes to, again, beauty, right? Hair, and it dictates everything. It dictates mental health. It dictates, what drugs we're sympathetic to and what drugs we're not.
Yeah.
Methadone was a crisis and crack was an epidemic, right?
So with that being said, considering, by the way, I'm drinking tea because I've been sick for like I don't know how many days, so I can't speak right. And I haven't. I don't know if this offends anyone. Happy holidays. Does it say happy holidays? It does. uh, so when you're thinking about white supremacy, right? When you consider your definition of white supremacy, can you give me 3 examples of how white supremacy shows up in the mental health field or social services?
Um, I think it's on so many levels, right? So I think even in, and I guess it can only be white supremacy because the powers that be, though, they don't look like us, right? So even when it comes to metrics and how our people are just broken down into numbers, right? They're not, it's they're not always families, they're not always people. It's just percentages and numbers and what percentage of these people are here, like service providing money. Like it's broken down. It's hard to explain.
No, I know. Oh, somebody said, can you ask the question again? Okay, so when you think about white supremacy, I'm asking Malinda if she can name 3 examples of white supremacy in the mental health field. So that's what Melinda's answering right now. Sorry, Melinda.
Wow.
I'm
In
trying
the
not to read
mental,
the things because then I'll get distracted.
no, that's okay. Is that Gilbert? Hi, Gilbert. Um, I struggle with, I struggle with that, Antonio, because the power dynamic in social welfare is that us as service providers, you know, we're the ones that service the people that look like us, right? Whether they call them clients, patients, consumers, tenants, whatever you want to call it, whatever name is the cool name for the season, right? I think even the idea that cultural competency is often not taught by people that look like us, so other people tell us what's offensive and what's culturally insensitive. Meanwhile, I understand that if I wear an afro to an interview, as opposed to not wearing an afro, it sends a very different message. I understand that when I make a telephone call to a clinic and they hear this voice, they don't expect to hear this face,
Mm.
right? To see the face. So I've seen it on different sides because I talk the way I talk, right? So sometimes it's put me in rooms where I might not specifically have been had I have not spoken this certain way, because by default, I was invited to an office, but when I'm there, they can't tell me to leave because I don't look the way I sound, which is what I got quite often. You don't look the way you sound. I know what that means, but that's not often, I don't know how to explain it, but
But can you
there's
say
a
more,
lot
can you say more about that? I think that's an interesting point, though. Like, I don't look like how I sound.
of the way I sound. Okay, so one example, and I may have told you about this before, and I may not have. When I lived in Georgia and looked for an apartment, I called on the phone and said, introduce myself. I'm looking for an apartment. Blah 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 blah. They gave me a list of apartments over the phone. I wrote down the addresses. When I went in person, and these addresses were lovely named roads, whatever, Maple, these lovely streets. When I went in person, I received another list, and it was Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, on all of those neighborhoods, where they are, right? So the list
Yeah.
that I was given over the phone was very different to the list that I was given in person when I went in person. And when I explained to her, no, I spoke to somebody and she gave me this address and this address, and she had written down my name. She said, oh, you're Malinda. And she said, you don't look the way you sound.
Oh, damn.
And I said, I get that a lot now, you know? But that, right? So even the idea of steering, where I would be looking for an apartment based on a presumption, right?
And so you find that also in the mental health field or social services, like you find that as a professional, you sort of bump up against that too.
I find that it helps me more when I'm trying to get services for people. If I'm sitting next to a client who may get on the phone and sound a certain way, as opposed to when I get on the phone for them and ask for services. Absolutely.
Mm.
But I use it to my advantage, right? So everyone can't use the presumption to their advantage. There's a presumption that I'm intelligent and that I may look different to how I sound, right? So the presumption that I get is that when I talk to somebody on the phone, I often get a little bit more headway than if my client, who sounds very South Bronx, will not get. Seen it time and time again.
Yeah. Like you sound like Cardi B, you might not get the service.
And that's just on the phone.
Right. And so are there any other examples that you can name, because I think you said something about management, so the top people, right? And then you
So,
name cultural competency and who sort of trains us in it.
cultural competency is one, because that's a fun phrase now, right? Everyone, cultural competency and this other thing, microaggression, I think they're calling it now. Bless them.
Racial microaggressions.
Yes. So, I don't subscribe to the term, period, because I think it's another back door, right? So microaggression, we're not allowed to call it ignorance because that offends the microaggressor. But microaggression in and of itself is offensive to us, but by us saying it's offensive, then we become a bully because the intent was never. I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
If I'm here to educate you, if it's helpful education, let it be that. But we're not going to call something a microaggression because you didn't know you were being racist. You don't get to do that.
So when you think about like the ideas or the examples of, white supremacy and how it shows up in the mental health field, can you expand on one, like in the mental health field specifically, can you expand on one specific example and sort of give us or illustrate a story or tell us an experience that surrounds that?
I don't know, Antonio. Again, I think I have to go back and say the same thing. I think it dictates every aspect of the work that we do, right? And I don't know if this is a cop-out, or I don't know if this is the answer that you're looking for, but I feel that everything that we do to service our people is dictated by people that don't look like us.
Mm.
So even MI, right? I'm not going to talk bad about motivational interviewing because the premise behind it is that it's client led and yada yada yada. But you know, in real life, when we do motivational interviewing, the idea of sitting down with a person who may be impatient or who may be frustrated, the idea of constantly reiterating to them what I'm hearing is, and what correct, like, am I, and Naomi, if you're on here, please put a question or a comment as far as what you feel about MI. MI is nice in Iowa, but I think the idea of motivational interviewing and how it's broken down into so much reiteration, and if I struggle with that as far as having a real conversation with somebody and helping them help themselves. I think there are elements of it that I think are great as far as being client led, but having, if you've ever seen what real MI is supposed to look like and how that can be had in a real conversation in a therapeutic session, I struggle with that.
Mm. So
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on MI? What are your thoughts on MI?
I like MI. I like motivational interviewing. I think for me, I never thought about it in the way you're describing it, but because the way I think about it is like it's a different sort of, when you sort of ask the questions and reiterate those questions in the way that you're describing them, it feels like, I mean, this is how I sort of take it in my own experience. It feels very like you're getting present, right, to the person's story, right? Like you're getting there with them. And when you're sort of asking them, or you're asking them a question like, so did I hear that right? And so on and so forth. It just feels like the way that I see it, the way, and I do kind of dig motivational interviewing. It feels like just getting present. You're getting present. You're getting present. And while you're getting present, right, to the person that you're serving or providing a service to, now they're also getting present, right? So I feel like it has that kind of power. But I like the way you sort of, you gave me another way of looking at it, right? And this is the point of the conversation, to sort of, in your own experience and in your own opinion, how do you see white supremacy show up, right, in the mental health field or social services? And that's the point, to sort of be able to think about, you know, our field critically, right? Because we are often not thinking about it critically. We're just, oh, this is what the professor said, or this is what, you know, the board said, and it's never like, well, what do we think, right? And I think it's an interesting take on motivation interview. I never thought of it in that way. MI fits. It went up. Can you read that?
For me?
There was something. I think it was Naomi saying something. All right, but I mean that's what I think. Did I answer your question?
MI fits the structure to the patient, not the patient to the structure. That's what Naomi said. I like that.
That's interesting. I wish. Well, but Naomi can't say more because she's not on the live. But but did I answer your question, Malinda?
I think it does, right? Because again, you know, for you, you like it, right? Naomi says, you say my heart and my eyes, I'm trying. I'm not sure what that is. But I like the idea. You know, I'm going to read it again. You know, MI fits the structure to the patient, not the patient to the structure.
Well, how does that? If you like that idea,
I wish she could go deeper into that.
How does that show up as white supremacy, you think?
I mean, who do you think, who invented motivational interview?
Well, I mean, you think about anything that we're sort of practicing, right?
Okay, I'm trying to read and I'm just, okay, go ahead.
So how would you link it? Is it because of who invented it?
I think that, is it because of who invented it? Yeah.
Because I think about, because when you look at it that way, that's everything, right? We're sort of, when we talk about the mental health field, or we talk about mental health in particular, or specifically, we're looking at things through the Eurocentric lens, right? It's not through like African-centered lens or the indigenous lens. It's through the Eurocentric lens. And even when I think of like peer-reviewed and, you know, evidence-based and like all these like terms to like say we're the thing, right? We got the stamp of approval because we're evidence-based or peer-reviewed, evidence-based and peer-reviewed mostly by white people, right? Not us, because we don't have usually the access to the resources, right, to sort of do those type of things. So it just feels like everything, like it's in everything, right? And the point of this conversation is to sort of bring awareness to that.
Oh, can I for you? Sorry. So Gilbert said that's how I felt being part of the system, right? So
What?
so as far Gilbert, I don't know if you can. Sorry, because I want him to have his say because he's a big part of who I am and why as well,
Okay.
right? So I don't know if Gilbert's still listening, but if you felt like that as part of the system, did you feel like any services that you received from childhood to your final time in whatever system you were in, and I won't speak to which one it was, do you feel like any part of that system was catered to you, sir? And if you can put on here, oh, he says I'm here. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Gilbert, do you feel like any services that you received catered to you and your particular situation and your trauma, right? Because I'm pretty sure there was a P in your PTSD that you didn't get to embrace either because you were still going through your trauma, right? So what did those services look like for you as someone who had to be in that system and had to go through every part of that system and had to be evaluated and all of these things that these people analyze you to decide what boxes you did and didn't check. And then at the end, they spit out a nice form that says you are this, 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 and this.
Even when you're describing that, Malinda, I'm thinking to myself, it almost feels like I can feel myself being triggered, right?
Yes.
Because I think about like, you know, being somebody who came from the hood, like, you know, having to go and be part of the welfare system. And then when my mother had to go to face, you know, there was a social worker there. And the social worker was really, really mean. And all I knew was that social workers were mean. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything else. Right. And the experience of my mother having to sort of maneuver through that space felt degrading because I felt like it degraded my mother, but then it trickled down to me as a child, right? Like it was also degrading to me and whoever else sort of accessed services from like, you know, the welfare system. And so even you asking that question to Gilbert made me think of, it was like I was asking questions to myself, right? And I was like, it gives me like an icky feeling, right? This icky feeling where it was like, this is what we stuck with. And I think when we think of white supremacy and how it shows up in the mental health field of social services, it almost feels that it's intentional, right? Like this is by design. It's not accident, right? It's not an accident that we as people of color or people who access services who are people of color, that we sort of exit that system feeling there's like a little something left there, right? And maybe it's not a little, it could be more a big something. But I feel like, and it's so interesting because you're asking Gilbert, but I'm thinking to myself about people I've spoken to. And what I'm thinking, who said this? What is this?
This is Bev. The question made me feel like I'm a part of the problem
based
on my employment. No.
Oh, wait, stay right there. Don't, hold on, Malinda. Don't entertain that yet because I'm going to ask you that question because if Bev feels that way, that's going to be a question for you because then, let me just finish my point. When we think about, so when I'm thinking about like clients that I worked with, right, there's been times that the client was put through a system, like I'm talking about mental health system in particular, where they had to go from this program to that program, this program. It's almost like by the time they was through getting whatever services they needed, which never solved the issue, right, they was worse off. Right? Like they got chewed up and spit out. But we're here to provide you a service. We want to, but yet you came out of that situation almost like worse than when you went into it. And so that's what I'm thinking about all those pieces. Now, because I didn't see Gilbert answering yet, did I? But based on what Beverly is saying, when you think for yourself, as a mental health professional, as a social service provider, how have you sort of addressed or challenged white supremacy in what you do?
Yes, me?
Yeah, you.
I think what all I can do is continue to humanize our populations, right? So that they don't become, contracts and like you said, clients and tenants and consumers. They continue to have first and last names with histories. They continue to be families. They continue to be children of. They continue to be fathers of. Like even at my program now, if you're a parent in my building, mother or father, Mother's Day you get a gift, Father's Day you get a gift. Doesn't matter if your kids were taken, doesn't matter if you gave your kids to your sister, doesn't matter if your kids died, doesn't matter if your kid was had in prison and you never had custody of your child. If you birthed a child and parented a child, whether you had that child with you for one day, their entire life, or never, you get a Mother's Day gift, fathers get a Father's Day gift because you're still a parent, right? Um, Now, that's not a tradition, that's agency wide, but it's little things we do to humanize our people, right? Death is a big part of addiction. It's a big part of poor health. It's a part of, no access to quality healthcare, right? When your clients die, we acknowledge that. We do memorials for them because, a lot of them go to Potter's Field. A lot
Yeah.
of them, you know, it's just acknowledging that their experience means something. And
So
we
what I'm
value
hearing,
that.
so what I'm hearing again, so like affirming them still, like how you sort of challenge it is by
Now,
affirming the individual client or family.
right.
That's what I'm hearing.
Hold on. So I can't put that into words as in a paragraph, but I'm going to try my best. It's going to be a while.
Is that
Okay,
Gilbert?
so that's Gilbert, yep. And Naomi, and the fact that you became a social worker, Antonio, making another platform to change the damage, right? So she's referring to your experience. All social workers are bad, and now look at you,
True.
right? And let's not forget what Beverly said, right? We're going to make sure that we keep that,
No,
you
we
know,
no,
that.
we're gonna go to Beverly. We're gonna go to it. We're gonna go to it. So now, and I think this is the point. This is how we sort of segue back to Beverly and what she said. So, so like you're saying, so I'm gonna sort of affirm these clients, right, or these families.
Yeah.
When you,
And I do it deliberately, right?
oh
I
yeah,
do it as not part of any, it's not a programming requirement. It's not a critical indicator on any audit. It's not, it's not anything that we get graded on by our funders, right? So if I don't do it, I still run a program, but it's a necessary piece from me, this woman of color who's in a position of power, to humanize the people that look like me that feel powerless to these many systems that they've become intertwined in.
yeah. Now going back to what Bev said, right? So do you ever feel like in some ways you're part of the problem because we work in this system? Do you have that
No,
sentiment? Do you feel that way?
no, because I think that um, without us being in these roles, um, then there's a disconnect between service provider and the human being, right? So oftentimes there's an unspoken connection, right? That our clients have with us. They don't know us. They don't know really, they don't often know anything much about us, but there's this unspoken connection that we have, right? So we can sit down and I can honestly say I've never prostituted. I can say I've never got drugs in exchange for money, but I can humanize my people on a level that they can't get from other people.
Mm.
Like we have a way of connecting with our people in a way that just other people just cannot. They can sympathize, they can empathize, but it's the idea that, when they look back and see someone that looks like them, and those children see someone behind a desk that looks like them, or me, myself, when I can sit with someone and say, listen, I was a home health day. They're like, you were? Yeah, I was a home health day too. I did what you do. You know, just that, again, it goes back to humanizing and humanizing ourselves.
Yeah. Listen, let me tell you a story, because when I was listening to what you say, I thought about, so I was in an intern. I'm not going to say where the internship was. I'm not going to say. But there was I was working with a Puerto Rican client, and him and I connected, right? Because, you know, considering all the other sort of mental health professionals who were there, they didn't look like us, right? So we connected. And he was deemed a problem, right, to that particular organization. But because him and I connected, you know, he sort of related to me in a different kind of way. Long story short, there was an issue that happened. I wasn't there, so no one could control him. And then I came back, and they wanted me to meet with him and whoever else they wanted me to meet with, you know, because I was sort of like his counselor. And while there was so it was like a meeting of like white people, and then him and I, but I'm like his support, right? And then they're like grilling him, and then he like made a joke that I understood, right? And then I laughed, and they saw the connection that we had, right? And after that, I got in trouble, right? Like I was pulled into the office by my supervisor and his supervisor, and they was like, Antonio, what's going on? Like, what's up? I was like, what you mean? Like, you and the client seemed to laugh together. I was like, because I understood, because he said something in Spanish, like it was like Puerto Rican joke. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then they twisted it up to make it think like me and the client was conspiring against them, which wasn't true. I was just connecting to him in a way that they couldn't. And so then I explained to them, listen, you know, I'm sorry you all feel this way. However, you are not me, right? Like I am relating to this client because of where he comes from and where I come from, and because of the similarities, right, and who we are, right? And that's not about conspiring against anyone. That's just what it is. And you can't be upset with me because you don't have that connection. Then I explained to them, no matter how many cultural competency classes you've ever been to or participated in, you will never be a person of color. And so it doesn't matter, you know, your great intention and so on and so forth. They're not going to connect to you mostly the way they connect to us. And but I shouldn't be sort of dealing with negative sanctions because of that. And so when I thought about what you're saying, like, because it was like the affirming, the normalizing, you know, like, what's up? Like, we're the same. You know what I'm saying? That they couldn't understand. Like, I got in trouble for that, which is weird, right? But I'm saying that because part of my next question, and I don't know if you ever dealt with this, but what like was, did you ever experience any backlash, or I was going to say feedback? Is this ending? Are you there? I see this thing is frozen. Yo, Malinda, where did you go? Am I still on? Oh, it says it probably froze. Malinda, so you see me still, right? Because I don't see Malinda. All right, listen. So what I was saying was that because I don't know where Malinda went, but part of the story was sort of being able to sort of affirm, right, in a humanistic way, like you're a human being, I'm a human being. I was saying that I got in trouble basically for that. Okay, I'm still on. Great. I don't know where Malinda went. Hopefully she could join us again. How do I, let's see if I could reconnect her. Abandonment issues. I don't know what that means. Oh, there you go, Malinda. Malinda, can you like knock back up? Like knock back up. You know, come back in. Malinda, come back in so we can, we almost done. So, let me see if I can do this. Oh, here we go. All right.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there you go. Come on, man. You.
Sorry.
I don't know. I was like, what's going on? What's happening?
I request
That's
answer.
that's the Bronx. That's what it is.
That's
Anyway,
Android.
so what I was saying, the question that I had before you got kicked off was, have you ever received any feedback or backlash for that, taking on that approach? I mean, I did. I mean, I was just sharing that I did. So I was wondering if you ever did.
Yeah, because I think it's a fine line in the minds of some people, right? So that then the issue of boundaries comes up, right? So, you know, I definitely had issues with boundaries earlier on in my career, definitely, because I didn't know how to not care. I didn't
Yeah.
know how to care between 9 and 5. I didn't know how to care only Monday to Friday. So I was 24/7. Call me if you need me. I'll be there. I'll show up. But then I realized I couldn't maintain that, right? So at
Mm-hmm.
first, people didn't understand the love that I had for the work that I did. Like, oh, what do you mean I have problems with boundaries? No, I care about these kids, and these kids need to know I'm there for them. And there's not a timestamp on commitment and caring and all of that good stuff. And then I realized, you know, there's this thing called burnout.
Oh.
You know? So, but I do think there is, and I think people recognize it more now where we didn't in the earlier days, that you do have to give a little bit of yourself. What did Gilbert say? Tell them about the examples of me eating the brownie cake. What is that, Gilbert? I don't know what that is.
Melinda, you should not be reading the comments.
I can't help it. It
I
comes up
know.
on my screen. Sorry. So
She go,
so
shoot. It's like I think of like a little cat. Oh, look, boom. Take it out.
yeah. So I think that, in order to be effective, there does have to be a little bit of you can't be this and think someone's going to open up to you. You can't sit there. You're taught, don't sit with your arms crossed, be open and blah 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 blah. All that non-verbal stuff is great, but I think people see when it's authentic, and people see when it's just when it's not. And I think you do have to give a little bit of yourself, just
Yes.
so that people know that. Because then, again, we diagnose these people with attachment disorders, but turnover creates so much attachment disorder in and of
Ooh.
itself. So to Bev's idea of being part of the problem, it's the idea of us coming, we commit, and then we leave, right? So
Yes.
we talk about turnover, we talk about attachment disorder and all of these things, and we pride ourselves in having these connections with these people, but then we leave, right?
Right.
And then so for the next person, it's harder for them to connect with them. It's harder for that person to connect with the new person. And we do become part of the problem, because I know I've left places before, and I know I've made connections with people, and it would be ignorant of me to say I wasn't part of the problem when it comes to that, because I
Mm.
know I've made connections with people and left with all good intention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then what happens? Malinda with no boundaries kept in contact, because I still
Mm-hmm.
wanted to know, right? And I still wanted, you know what I mean? So don't forget Bev's question, because I want to know what you think about that as far as being
I
part of
didn't
the
I,
problem.
I didn't see Bev's statement. You want to know what I think about that?
Yeah, because it's important.
Oh, I've really struggled with this a lot for many years. As whether I was a case manager, a social worker and doing casework, which I just said, a therapist, a counselor, like an advocate counselor, all types of counselors. I was intake counselor, all types of counselors. I always, always, always had an issue with feeling like I was part of the problem, right? Because despite the fact that I, as a human being, can sort of affirm, my community's humanity, right? I felt like, and I understand that when we look at the current mental health field or social services, a lot of it sort of maintains, structurally speaking, not because an individual worker, because we're not all the same, right? So we might have a lot of Black and brown workers. Don't mean we all affirming each other, right? There's a lot of us who do a lot more harm than good, right? Because we're
Right.
dealing with our own trauma. We haven't done the work, and so we got a little degree here and there. So we go in there, we're like, yeah, and then we're like,
Mm-hmm.
destroying our people further. But I felt like when I think about the structure, it always felt oppressive, even to me. As a worker, I always felt like even
Mm.
even knowing right? Like even knowing like, you know, being a worker sometimes makes me feel complicit, right? Because there's some things that I see and understand that I can't speak up against, because then I'm going to get, you know, the negative sanctions. And so I always felt, I always questioned that, always. And I still question it to the day. I mean, I still, even right now, I question it, right? Even as a therapist, you know, my own private practice, I question it. Because, you know, I think about, you know, the insurance companies, and I think about diagnoses and what we have to do in order to get, so they can get paid or whatever. So all those things, and I can go deeper, but I won't, because we're almost out of time. That being said, the last question that, or sort of, if you can sort of give us one solution, and I think you was already stating that with the sort of affirming the humanity of your clients. What do you think when you think about the idea of white supremacy sort of infiltrating the mental health field? What is a solution that we could think of as a possibility?
It sounds cliche, right? But I think it's us showing up,
Ooh,
you know, ourselves, right? It's us showing up, right? Because it's very rarely does it happen from the top down, right? So it's literally us showing up and having the balls to say, listen, you know, this, you know, even with the assumption of, listen, the assumption is, you know, you guys had great intentions in doing this, and this, but this does not work. This does not work. And you have to be comfortable and confident, but you can't just be, as Professor Gray would say, part of the problem chorus without offering a solution, right? So if you're going to listen, this doesn't work, you better come with a suggestion of something that does, or something that makes. But you can't just be there with the, this doesn't work, that's not going to work, this is BS, this is racist. All of that could be true. But if you're not becoming part of the solution, then I don't want to hear it.
And showing up is part of the solution, is what you're saying.
Showing up and
it's so simple.
And speaking up.
Yes. I love that answer, because it's so simple, yet it's so powerful at the same time. Because, you know, I think that's what makes a difference for so many of our clients. Even if somebody like me who feels like, oh my goodness, I'm part of the system and so on and so forth, like I still show up, and that makes all the difference in the world, right? And, you know, I also got to think about, and what you're saying is that, you know, not these clients are not always going to be in sort of accessing or looking for services, right? We sort of, some of us grow out of that and evolve away from that. But we can still leave that impact is still left. Okay. So anyway, so I just want to, we're out of time now. I don't want to like keep people, because it's already 7:59. So I want to make sure that I honor people's time. Thank you so much for being here, part of the first sort of installment or episode of this series. Just so everyone who joined us, thank you so much for joining us. I'm gonna let you know that next Tuesday at 7 p.m. we have our second interview or featured guest. We're gonna sort of unpack the same conversation. So unpacking white supremacy, it's a series. And then after that, we'll be back in January, like the third week of January, with sort of third live. But this is just basically, like I said, it's an offshoot of Freedom Fighters of the Mind's initiative. If you're a Black or brown therapist who is currently addressing or challenging white supremacy in your work, please join us in Freedom Fighters of the Minds. Our next meeting is next Wednesday at 6 p.m. And you can DM me for the link, for the Zoom link. If you're a Karen or a Ken, please do not join us, because you will get this work. So I just want to put that out there in case you are. As Black and brown therapists identified, people who are challenging white supremacy in your work. Now, you can join us there. Please DM us, or DM me, or Antonio at theliberatedself.org. So with that being said, Malinda, you want to say any final words? Because we don't have time for questions, because we obviously are out of time.
No, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to come on. Thank you for having me be your co-pilot. I appreciate that. This was great. I liked the space. This was really good.
Thank you. And listen, we're going to do other ones in the future. We're going to do other things. Right? This is just the start of something else. So now I got to figure out how to end this live. I don't know how to.
Naomi, it was great. I can't wait till the next one either. This dialogue is so helpful.
Oh, okay. So helpful. You know, so interesting.
But you know what you have to do? You got to be more. You got to be more proactive in these comments, Antonio. You have to respond to these people.
I know, but I just feel like because of time limitations, if we get into the comments, we'll get off track.
Nope, it won't be interactive if you don't respond to these comments.
All right, if you want to respond to comments now, we could.
So when they're in there, you got to respond. Gilbert, thank you so much for joining. Anastasia, ooh, miss you, Munchkin. Bev, your heart is in it, so don't get out. Gilbert, you already know. You're my heart. You already know. I'm going to call you later.
Well, thank you, Spicy Colombiana. So how do I end this is the question now.
You're asking me. This is my first time ever doing this, so.
Yeah, this is my first series.
Somebody else wanted to hear from Gilbert. You see that, Gilbert? You're going to have to be on the next one too, because people want to hear from you. You have a voice and you have a story, Gilbert. And I would love for you to share in a safe space, and this is a safe space for you to do that.
Is Gilbert a mental health professional?
You know what? In a way, yes, he is.
Because I was just thinking maybe if Gilbert wanted to share, then if he's a mental health professional. But if he's like a client, is you know.
He's an expert. He's an expert on the experience.
Oh, maybe he could join the live one time.
Yeah, we should do that.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. I really appreciate it. Like I know, like I was telling Malinda, we're gonna have 3 people, and if it's 5, it's a breakthrough. So we had about 15, you know, in and out. So I'm gonna end this live now. Thank you so much, Malinda. Have a great night.
Thank you.
See you soon, and have a good night, everyone.
Gilbert, your words have power.
Let's see. I still don't know how to end this damn thing. Oh, here we go.